this is my virtual art night video. I'd much rather be in person with you all, but under the circumstances, I wanted to show you my process. So I'm going to be painting with enamel today, which enameling is the process of using glass onto metal. And with my process, I actually paint with particles of glass and fire them into a kiln, fusing them to the metal. So I'm going to show how I make my enamel jewelry using this process. And I actually paint on both sides of the enamel, so you get to see a little story on. So the first step of my enameling process is to actually design what I'm going to make. So I'll sketch in a sketchbook my little design, and today I'm going to be drawing a sweet pea because it's one of the birth flowers, and I'm making a line of birth flower pendants. So sweet pea, there's my design, and the first decision I have to make in the process is what shape I'm going to be enameling. So today it's going to be a circle. So I have my large copper circle, and copper is the one of the only types of metal that is good for enameling because it's a pure metal, which just means that in the kiln it won't separate, so it's a good metal. And the first thing we do with this is we have to prep it. So what we have to do in order to prep it is to first drill a hole in it. And so right now I'm just making a spot to drill a hole. And then I'll take my drill and I'll just drill a hole in this spot. Hole. The next step is to prep the metal, so I'm going to do that by scratching it with an aluminum stone, which is a tool used in enameling to scratch the surface of the metal and give it some texture. And it's best done with water. I am scratching the metal. And I'll do that to both sides. And you can see that it's matted on that side. And then I'll flip it and do the other side. I then will take the powder. I'm going to be laying a base enamel over the metal, and this is the first step, and I build layers of enamel on top of that. So this is the background color. So I'm going to be I take a scoop with my sifter that has a mesh bottom and a little cup, and I scoop my enamel and get it ready for sifting. And then I take some what's called clear fire, which is basically like a sticky thin glue. It fires clear in the kiln, and it'll sort of act as a bonding agent for the enamel. Now, you don't need to have it, but it just keeps it from going everywhere. And I do both sides, enameling on both sides, so I like to just do it at the same time. And this is a way of getting it to stick while it's upside down. So I just paint that on, and then before it dries very quickly, I sift on my enamel just by tapping the sifter. And it comes out and coats it. And then I like to use a little toothpick so that I don't bump the enamel and take off any enamel. So now it's pretty good at staying on there. and so it can go upside down on my little trivet. And then once I have that side done, I could coat up the top in clear fire, but I'm just going to sift it right on. And I cover the whole surface evenly. And then I like to take my toothpick and sort of just clean out the little drilled hole so that it doesn't melt right over that. And now I'm ready to fire. The next step is to take the trivet and with your enamel on it and put it onto a little firing rack which goes in the kiln. These little feet. And room underneath so that I can take my firing fork and put it right into the kiln, which is really small. This is my kiln. It's very hot, so I actually open it with a little oven mitt, and it's at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. And so to put it into the kiln, you need the firing rack and the fork. So my next step is to fire it. So I take my trivet with my firing fork and I put it into the kiln very quickly and gently and close it back up. And I wait about 2 minutes and check it. I can even look through this little window here to see how it's doing, but I also have a little otter to let me know that there's something in the kiln, made by Ellen Blomgren of Mudstone Studios, so it's my little kiln god. And I wait and watch the temperature. When it hits 1500, I wait about 30 seconds and then I open up the kiln again. It's not really melting until it reaches 1460, so the heat escapes and heats back up again. And once it's reaching 15, I know it's ready to come out soon. It's sugar fired right now, if you want to get a look at that. It's sort of like sugar on the surface. It's not completely bonded, but it's sort of starting to bond. And the next step is lemon peel, which looks like a lemon peel. And you can see it's starting to get to lemon peel now. And I gotta keep the heat in a little bit. And then once it comes out, I don't just take it right out, I like to put it in another kiln just to let it cool slower. Because what enamel does not like is a fast change in temperature. What happens is if it changes too quickly, it'll crack. Because the metal and the glass are cooling at different rates, and we want to slow that down as much as possible so that they don't crack. So I keep it in this other little kiln for a few minutes. This one is off. Alright, and we're ready to take it out. And then I take my kiln gun and move it to the other kiln. And that is the firing process. The next step is to wait 10 minutes for it to cool down enough so that it can be handled and taken out of the kiln without breaking. So the next step after it's cooled is to take it out. It's still a little bit warm. I'm gonna burn myself. So I take it out, and to get it off the trivet, it's actually melted right onto it. So to get it to come off, I actually just bang the trivet onto a block, and it comes right off. And still warm. But you can see that it has enamel coated on it. This is the back side, and I'll scratch it again and put more enamel. And these are the little marks from the trivet. And that's the front side. It's a little clearer. And I'll just keep repeating that process of layering more enamel onto it and fusing it in the kiln. And once this is cool enough, it's cool now, I can scratch with an aluminum stone, the same one as before, and just make the surface really smooth and ready for more enamel and just really textured. And so I'm going to use the aluminum stone to scratch the surface to make it even and textured for more glass. I'm also going to remove any black burned parts around the edges. And now we're ready to add another layer of glass on both sides. So I coat it in clear fire on the back. And add some more glass evenly. And then I can flip it over and add it to the trivet. Now we flip it. And it's ready to go onto the trivet. And get some glass on the other side. Now when you're doing this, you also might want to wear a mask and just be careful not to breathe in the glass powder. It's ready to go back in the kiln. And we'll go right back in the kiln. Now when you saw inside the kiln, you saw all coils surrounding the enamel from all sides. So that really helps to have an even temperature all around it. And now we wait about 2 minutes, and then we'll take it out and put it in the cooling kiln again. And this one isn't on, but it's just a little bit insulated enough that it can cool down with the amount of heat it comes out of the kiln with and just slowly cool off, rather than if it was left out in, you know, normal room temperature, and it would cool a lot faster. You know, I can check on it. And it's only sugar fired right now. It just looks like granulated sugar on the surface. And it's starting to heat up to lemon peel, where it's a little bit bumpier and more fused. 1500. Let's see how it's doing. Alright, it's looking good. Now I can move it to the next kiln. And I can just wait another 10 minutes and then repeat that process as many times as it takes to get the background a nice, thick, built-up layer of enamel. And once I have that done, then I can move on to etching it, the surface, and painting on it. Once we have an enamel that we like, the layers of color built up, and it feels nice in your hand, or the color looks really solid, then we can go ahead and prep it for painting with more glass. It's all colored glass. So the next step is to coat it with some glass etching. And this will just sort of thick like toothpaste, and it just goes right on, painted on, all over the surface of the front and the back. And I set that down on some plastic and just paint the glass etchant on it. And then I wait about 10 minutes and clean it off with a toothbrush and water in the sink, and it'll be like an eggshell matte. So it'll be ready to paint with more glass on it, and it will keep whatever I add to the surface from moving around on it too much. And it'll just give it a good texture to hang on to. And so we'll come back in about 10 minutes and clean it off. And one of the first steps with enameling is to decide on your design. And part of that isn't just, it's more than just picking a design shape. It's also figuring out what colors I want to use. A lot of times I'll, just think of what colors I want to use, and then the number of the enamel corresponds with the color, and I have most of them memorized, so sometimes when I see a color I automatically think of the number that it corresponds with for enamel. But I can also just check my color wheels, and these are color wheels that I've made with all the enamel colors that I have. I'm always making new ones with more colors that I get in, but these have the numbers and they have the little color next to it on the color wheel. So when I decide what colors that I want in a design, I just quickly jot down what colors I'm going to be using. So for this sweet pea design, I'm going to be using 9720 and 9480. And I might use 1319, which is a green, or graphite for these stems. I haven't decided yet. So the colors you can find right there on my color wheel. It's a nice bright pink. Great for sweet pea. And I can always change as I go, but what happens is the colors have corresponding numbers because when they are fired and when they are in their crushed powder form, they aren't necessarily going to be the same color. So sometimes it can be hard to tell what they're going to look like, and that's why I have the color wheels. So for example, let's see, 1615 looks sort of close, but not exactly. Just as an example, it looks slightly darker and bluer when it's fired compared to when it's powder. It just has less luster and vibrancy usually. And it can even look different when it's just been fired and it's coming out of the kiln. A lot of the colors are completely different when they're hot as opposed to when they cool down. So sometimes, for example, this sort of mustard color, it looks red when it comes right out of the kiln. So once we're ready, and it's been about 10 minutes or so, we can take the enamel with the glass etchant on it, and we can move it to the sink with some tongs and rinse it off, and use a toothbrush to just kind of scrub it off gently of the enamel. You can see it's like an eggshell matte coat now. And we can go and paint on it. So once it's all clean and eggshell matte, then I can start to paint on it with the glass enamel. So I use different colored powdered glass. same as before when we layered it, but in just different colors. So I'll pick out my colors for the design and then write them on my palette so that I know what I'm painting with, because the colors are a little different when they're fired. And I'll add them to my palette, just a little bit. So I'll just add them to my palette, all the colors, the corresponding numbers. So once I have all the colors in my palette, I'll take a toothpick and I can add a little bit of water to them, just a little bit, a couple of drops, just a trick. And you just want it to be like wet sand, not too much water, and sort of just mix them. And then I can start to paint on my enamel. I also like to map out where certain parts of the design are going to go. Sometimes I just freehand it, but other times I like to just give myself a guide of where the design is going to go, because the glass is going to be fused over my pencil for the most part. So I decide which is going to be the back side and just kind of map it out. Sometimes I just put little dots and kind of figure out where I want things to go. And that's good enough. And then I can do the same on the front side if I wanted to. Or just do it by eye. This is a really simple design. If it were a pet portrait, I would map it out first in pencil before I would start to paint. And that'll help just to create a little map for myself. So now I have my map, and I'm gonna add some colors. Palette around, and I just pick up a little bit of the enamel. I can dot it onto the surface, and I choose how much I need, and I do the back side first, so I'll make little tiny buds. And the great thing about this process is when you're painting with it, you can always rinse it off. So it's not permanent until you fire it. When you fire it, it's like saving your work. And you sort of just, you can move it around a little bit. Not too much. But you can add and just kind of keep the enamel wet. Because once it dries, you can't move it around anymore. You have to just rinse it off or leave it as is. Okay, now the front side. So the next step is to fire it. So it has all of its dried enamel on it. Waited a few minutes till it was dry. And now I'm going to put it in the kiln for another 2 minutes or so. And it's enameled on both sides. And then it'll go in there. And wait for us to be ready to take it out. So now it's going to come out of the kiln. It's actually right now looking sugar fired. Or maybe a little lemon peel. Keep the heat in. And it looks good. It's really glossy, glassy, hot. The colors are all different. That green is like a red, and the pink looks like a white. You can't really see it in there. And we'll take it out after about 10 minutes of it cooling, and we'll etch it another time with the glass etchant to make it like an eggshell, and then we'll be able to draw on it. And now we're going to take it out of the kiln. It's pretty good, not too hot, and that's how it looks. I'm going to break it off the trivet. And it's going to cool down for a few more minutes, but you can see how it looks. And now I'll, once it's all cleaned off, now I just have to scratch off any nubs that it was attached to the trivet. And I had to break the piece off the trivet. I always have to do that. And it's part of the process to just grind them down. Now we're ready to draw, so I'm going to take my piece, which is an eggshell mat. I'm going to flip it to the back side first, and I'm going to draw on the back first. So now I actually secure it with this blue painter's tape, just to get it from moving and smudging. And I use a mechanical pencil and get it really sharp by twirling it on the paper, just to sharpen the tip of it. And once it's nice and sharp, I start to draw, and I base it on my original design. And then I flip it to the other side once it's done. So you can see the front and back. The front and, I mean the sketch and the... And then I flip it to the front. And this is where the tape's really important, because if I don't tape it, it'll smudge the back side if I move it around too much. I think I'm done. Next to the original. And now it's ready for firing. And take it off. Back side. Now we put it on a trivet and put it back in. Now I put it back in for another 2 minutes. firing is the most temperamental because when the graphite is on the surface, it starts to burn off in the kiln. So we want it to go up to temperature as fast as possible so that the glass turns molten, and the graphite, instead of burning off too quickly, will sink into the molten glass and be preserved in the glass. And it's starting to get molten, but I just like to give it a few more seconds to sink. The longer I leave it, the better it sinks into the glass, but you don't want it to burn off either. So that seems maybe another couple seconds. Let it cool for another 10 minutes. Alright, taking it out of the kiln. Still cooling off a little bit. You can see it. And you can see it is all ready for its last clear coat. So I'm going to add a clear coat to it, and then I'm going to do the finishing touches. So first I'm just going to grind these little nubs off for the last time. And now I'll put a clear coat. Just get my brush wet with a little clear fire. And this part is just really lightly adding a little bit of clear coat for the clear coat of glass. Really doesn't take that much. And I have a little bit of clear over it. So the reason I do this, I don't have to do it, but I think it just helps to make sure that the enamel just lasts. The drawing will just last a little better on it. I mean, it sinks into the enamel, the graphite pencil sinks into it, but that way it just doesn't really, you know, it's just a little more protected under another layer of glass. And then the enameling part is done. I'm gonna gently put this back in for another 2 minutes or so. Not even that long. I'm just gonna hope that heats up really quickly because, like the graphite stage, it's still very delicate and at risk of burning off. Peek. And it's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to take it out now. It's looking pretty good. Don't want it to burn off. And we'll let that cool for another 10 minutes or so and then do the finishing details. So now we're taking it out of the kiln for the last time, tapping it off the trivet. Oops, a little warm. But it's all done and has the clear coat on it. So I'm just going to put a piece of liver of sulfur in the mix, and we'll use that to dye the metal. But first we need to scratch the edge of it. And once that's done, we can add it to, we can do the patina process now that that's done. So, I'm going to dunk it and submerge it with this little tray, this little mesh sifter, into the liver of sulfur. And it's kind of a process of just layering it on, rinsing it and layering it, and it should be ready to go. So now that it's dyed, I'm just going to add a little sterling silver ring to it. It's called a bail for a necklace. It's where the necklace gets slid onto the chain and attaches to the pendant. Okay. So I'm adding a little bail, just closing the ring, making sure there's no gap at all. Bit of solder, which is this little syringe. Just makes it easier. And this makes it closed so that the ring won't come off. It can't open because the metal will be bonded. And then just solder it by adding some heat with a little handheld torch. It's really tiny. I'm getting close for this. You can see I'm just going to quickly kind of heat the metal up just away from the enamel, but just focusing it on the ring. There we go. Perfect. If you want to get a little shot of that. It's cooling off now, and it will be, you can see where it's soldered, a little black part. And so yeah, we'll just wait, and because even though we didn't put the heat directly on the enamel, it still got hot because it was nearby. So rather than put it in water right away and potentially crack it from cooling it down too quickly, we're just going to wait for about 5 minutes, and then we'll just clean up that little bail. So now that it's cool enough, I can now scrape this sort of blackened parts off and just clean it up a little bit. Okay, so once that most of the bail is all smooth, just kind of a little bit of texture to it. I really like when it looks sort of a little more matte than shiny. I like to take the little rough side of the sponge and just kind of smooth it for a satiny look on the metal, and just turn and clean it a little bit. Just get any fire scale off of the metal. Again, without touching our black copper. Dry it off. And it's done. Now it just goes on a chain and gets it wrapped up super pretty. And there's the back side, little story. So all of my work has something on the back side that has the start. So little seeds or little buds, and then on the front side it has them opening up and blooming. So it's a little bit of a story in pictures from the front and back. Alright, so now we have our final piece, and there it is. Just put it on a chain. And we also have, you flip it over, the back side has the little buds, and it's all done. Thank you so much for watching this video and for coming to Virtual Art Night. I'd much rather you be here, but I'm so glad I got to show you the process. As you can see, it's dark now, so it's a really long process. It's very involved, so it does take a lot of dedication of time, and so I'm glad I got to show you the whole process from start to finish, because usually art night I would get to chat with everyone and they'd see a little bit of the process of the whole picture of it, so it was kind of fun to do the whole thing for you. I wish you were here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye. The piece I made in this video, along with many others, including affordable printed versions, are available on my website at caitmarchettiJewelry.com and on Etsy. Thanks so much for your support. Bye!